Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Missy Jenkins Smith, and she's going to tell us about her near-death experience. And you're in Kentucky?
Yes, I am. I am. My near-death experience happened when I was 15 years old and in the 10th grade. It was close to, or this coming December 1st will be 26 years since this happened to me. But I had went to school like any normal day. I have a twin sister that both of us would always go to a prayer circle that met in the lobby of our school. And the prayer circle for us was just a way to kind of like, let go of or kind of deal with the problems or the things that we were going through, in life as a teenager. And then go to school and not have to worry all day long, just kind of like give it to God and, pray about it and have other support that are in the group. There was about 30 kids in the group, and the school that I went to was a very small school. It was there was 3 schools in the county, and that was the smallest school. And so my parents actually moved to that area because they said that was going to be the safest school. They didn't want to live in the city area. They wanted to live where, it was the small school. And so if I didn't know everybody personally in that school, I knew their name. And so that morning when I went to school that morning, we rode to school with my old best friend's older sister. And before we left, though, I tried to hurry as fast as I could. I knew that if I didn't hurry up and get ready, because after that, it was right after Thanksgiving break, December 1st was. And so it was kind of difficult for 2 teenage girls after probably sleeping in every day and staying up super late, waking up a Monday morning. So I was trying to hurry because I knew that if, as soon as she got out into the driveway, she'd probably leave us and not take us to school. And then I'd have to ride the bus, which I was not wanting to, or worse, my dad taking us to school. So I wanted to hurry. But one of the things I regret doing that morning was not stopping and taking the time to tell my mom and dad how much I loved them. Because at that moment, I never thought or would have ever thought something like this would happen to me and that my life would change forever. But I got to school, nothing was out of the ordinary. We met in the lobby, and there were always like little groups of people sitting outside of the prayer circle. It was where students who were being dropped off by parents would come in, and it was also where the office was. So this was right before the bell rang for everybody to get to class. And so we prayed and we said amen. And I didn't have but just enough time to walk to the middle of the lobby. And then that's when a 14-year-old boy pulled a 22 out of his backpack and he started shooting at us. And then the first thing I saw was not the boy with the gun. I saw a girl I knew who was 14 years old. She was a freshman, get shot in the head, and she fell down to the ground. And so when you're in a situation like that, you instantly start trying to make sense of it. And so I was telling myself it was a joke. I wasn't familiar with guns, so the gunshots I heard around me, they sound like firecrackers to me. So it made sense that this was a joke. But I remember hearing 3 slow pops, and then it was a spray of bullets, and I was hitting the spray. And I remember when I was hit, like it didn't even hurt. It hit me in the left shoulder, which I had a black shirt on. So after I was on the ground, I had no clue where I'd been shot at. And I didn't even know I was shot until my twin sister told me what was going on. And that's when we knew. But as soon as I was shot, it was almost like fainting because I had a ringing in my ears. And as I fell to the ground, it was like I floated. And then when I landed on the ground, it didn't even hurt. The impact of hitting the floor didn't even hurt. And then my twin sister, who saw the boy with the gun, she saw the girl get shot in the head, but she also felt a bullet go through her hair, like right in the back. Because later on, she had like my older sister looked at the back of her neck, and she had a red mark once she remembered that happened. But when she felt that, she also saw me on the ground. So she then got on the ground and she crawled over to me and she hovered over me while he was still shooting. But when he finally stopped, that's whenever I started asking my sister what was going on and what was happening. And then that's when she told me that there was a gun. And then she told me who did it. And I knew the boy. I liked being around him. I couldn't imagine or believe that this was the person that she said did this. But after that, I explained to my sister that I couldn't feel my stomach. It was odd because like I didn't feel bad at all at that point. I just noticed I couldn't feel my stomach. I really didn't notice my legs yet, but I know that's shock, and that's probably what was going on. We have me and my twin sister have another best friend that was with us that morning, and she was grazed on the left shoulder. And my twin sister saw that she was hurt, and so she looked at me and said, "Be strong, don't die. I'll be back to check on you." So she talked to our friend, and then she became at one point super overwhelmed, but she decided that she needed to leave the lobby because there's nothing else that she could do that morning, what was going on. And this was way before like lockdown drills, things like that. So it was kind of mass chaos, and they ended up taking all the kids to the detached gym outside the school. But it was kind of cool because my sister, even though she left, she was able to call my parents from a payphone because cell phones existed, but payphone was what she had to use. But she was able to tell my parents that when she left me that I was alive and I was talking, and it kind of gave them hope and also gave them the right information. But when my sister left me, I then had a teacher, my algebra teacher actually, and I'm terrible at math, so I was surprised that she was the one that was with me. I always thought she hated me because of my avoidance of math. But she knelt down beside me and she began to pray. And that's when I started to get scared and started thinking, what's going to happen to me? And I looked at my teacher and I said, "Am I going to die?" And she said, "No, you're not going to die. You're going to be fine." Well, then I told her, I was like, "I'm paralyzed. I know I am. I can't feel my stomach." And then at that point, I was noticing my legs. And my teacher, she kept saying, "No, you're not paralyzed. You're just in shock." But I think she knew exactly what was happening to me. I think she knew. And I did too. But she was trying to do her best, as a teacher who was never taught to deal with something like this, to keep me from going into shock and things getting worse for me. But then all of a sudden, even though I felt fine the entire time, all of a sudden I started to get really tired and I wanted to close my eyes. And I remember my teacher saying, "Don't close your eyes, keep them open, don't close them." And then all of a sudden I got to the point where I couldn't fight it anymore. And then I shut them. And then all of a sudden, I'm going to have a hard time finding words for this because I feel like there almost isn't words to describe what I was feeling or what I experienced. It seems like a vague situation, but I felt like a lot happened because I don't know things. Like, I don't know who I was with. I don't know what was said, but I know like the feelings I had. But whenever I closed my eyes from the lobby, it was like wherever I was at that point, it's like I woke up. That was a bad dream. It's almost like what we're living right now is not real. And that one day we'll wake up and then that would be what's real. And that's what it felt like. It was like I had a nightmare and I kind of remembered some of it, but it didn't even like anything that I wanted to focus on or even talk about. I just kind of was like, whoa, like this, thank God that's not real kind of feeling. And so I remember being with a few people, but I was talking to somebody who was to my right, like most of the time, but I don't remember looking at them. I don't remember what I said to them, and I don't know where we were, but I do know that I was very familiar with them. I remember laughing and kind of joking around, so I knew them well and, got along with them. And I felt comfortable, but I don't know what was said or done. And I remember at one point, we were walking is what we were doing. We're walking somewhere, and then somebody rode a bike beside me, but rode it so close that I had to like knock into the person beside me to my right. And then all of a sudden everything went black. And then I guess just like fainting. I don't know if anybody has ever or if you've ever fainted before, but it's like all of a sudden everything kind of comes back into focus. Mm-hmm. And then I was back on the lobby floor and I was staring at the ceiling and I thought, this is real, but at the same time, I felt like what had just happened was real and it was very confusing. But one thing I did know was that all of a sudden I wasn't scared anymore. Dying was not a fear. I knew I was going to be okay. I remember as I laid on the ground, still waiting for the ambulance, I did get sick because my body was shutting down. But I looked over to my right, and there was a girl that I didn't know very well. She was a senior, but she was shot the exact same place that I was. But she wasn't paralyzed, but she was bleeding internally, and she bled internally and died in surgery later on. I remember watching her like roll all over the ground and moan. And I didn't know that I was watching her die. I had no clue. But once we got into the ambulance, I don't even know who I was in the ambulance with. They were giving that person CPR. And I remember the paramedic being all over the ambulance. And I remember telling him, he was trying to give me an IV. And I was like, listen, let's not do that here. Let's do it when we get to the hospital. Why don't you help them? And I thought that maybe I made that up in my head, because when you're in a situation or stressful situation like that, I found that there was even situations that I kind of felt like I made some stuff up, like I thought something happened when it didn't. And I was really questioning on whether I was as calm as I felt like I was. And we had talked to some nurses and the paramedic, and he said, yes, you were super calm, you were okay. And I was like, that's what I thought. I thought it was okay. I guess I was questioning that. And then once we got to the ER, they quickly gave me 2 pints of blood. I had 2 IVs, one giving me fluids, the other the blood. I also had to have a chest tube that went into the left side of me, into my lung. And then they started performing little tests, like taking a needle and poking me or asking me to move my feet. And I couldn't feel the pokes and I couldn't move my feet. And then that's when they told me, as far as they knew, without x-raying, that I was paralyzed. But any normal person would be devastated and upset. And because I knew what paralysis was, I knew there wasn't a cure for it. This was not a good thing. And I remember feeling okay about it, that it was okay. And I kept thinking, like, why am I okay with this? Because I look crazy. I need to be crying right now. So then I try to make myself cry. And then I just look silly because I'm not okay. I wasn't a good actress whatsoever. So I just stopped crying. But I felt like the whole time, like when my family came to visit me, I was comforting them. Like my grandmother was crying and I was like, Grandma, I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm here. I'm okay. And then when we got to the x-ray, I then found out the path of the bullet. I learned that 22s bounce around in your body. And so it entered my left shoulder, and you won't be able to see where, but it's right over here. It went through there. It bounced around and missed every major artery and organ inside my body, besides my lung and my spinal cord. And when it exited out of the back of my spine, it didn't even go through the back of my shirt. It fell out on the floor when they were about to x-ray me, and they showed it to me. And so I didn't have to have surgery to have that removed. And my heart's right here. It didn't hit my heart. And I had a doctor who showed me an x-ray where he was just like, I don't know how you're still alive. And I was like, how's that? And he showed me where the esophagus and the aorta was so close together, but somehow the bullet went in between those without hurting the aorta or hurting my esophagus and hitting my spine, because I'm paralyzed from mid chest down. And it hit my spine without any of those things. I could have bled to death, or I could have, had some kind of toxic thing with the esophagus. And so I looked back at the girl, or thought back to the girl that died, that was 17, that shot the exact same place I was. It must have hit her aorta and she died. And I think at that point, that's when I thought, things could be so much worse than what I'm dealing with right now. I could be gone. I'm getting a second chance. And I think at that point, I felt like whatever it was that happened in my near-death experience, I think that it was preparing me to do what I was meant to do for my life. It was kind of like showing me my purpose. And that was really hard for me when it came to, like, I guess kind of like survivor's guilt. But I questioned, like, why is she gone and I'm here? Because she's probably a better person, I felt like, than me at that time. I felt like I was probably gonna, I guess I was more like a follower. I was very quiet, I was shy, and I would never, I don't know, like I probably would never stand up for myself during that time. And this girl was just very just a good person all around. And I questioned, why am I still here? And I don't know. But what I do know is that at 15 years old, I learned the purpose for my life. And there's people that are 80 that are still wondering what was their purpose here. And I think I consider myself blessed at that point. I think that also I've somehow all of a sudden I had this mindset that I never thought I had. I had these abilities that I never thought I had, like being able to speak publicly. I would have rather been punched in the face before the shooting happened to speak in front of people than now. I've spoken in front of millions of people, and I'm doing it now. I'm talking and talking. I'm a talker. But before, I just kind of kept to myself. And I think I'm just hoping that what happened to me is making change, and that is my purpose, and that I'm helping prevent other school shootings from happening when I speak and I share what we did wrong. Back when the school shooting happened at my school, it was like one of the first school shootings. It was before Columbine. It was right after a shooting that happened in Mississippi. That happened on October the 1st, and then ours happened on December the 1st. And then soon after that, there was a middle school in Arkansas. And I remember talking to these kids on Montel Williams' show on via satellite while I was still in the hospital. So I think that my near-death experience, there had to be somebody there telling me that everything was going to be okay and that I was going to be fine, and that to keep going and to not let the negative things that come with what I've got, with the wheelchair and the frustration of being a teenager and all this new life that I was having to live, that it was going to be okay, because one day I'm going to wake up and that's going to be what's real. And I've always said, I believe I'm going to walk again. It may not be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, but if I don't walk in this lifetime, I'll walk when I'm in heaven. And to me, I think that's what I'm going to wake up and everything will be fine.
What do you think that was about? Why do you think you were shown that, like somebody going by on a bike? And
I think it's just that I was comfortable with that person, and that there were others besides just me there. I guess I felt like they were friends and family, but I didn't determine which was which. Whoever it was beside me, I kind of felt like the person beside me was like a male, or like a father figure kind of thing. It made me feel like they were older, but nobody like younger or my age is what it didn't feel like. But it was like they were comforting me kind of feeling. And, like I said, it's hard for me to describe because I don't really remember where we were. I don't know what we said, but I know that there were things that made changes after I woke up, that I wasn't scared anymore, and that I was calm when I shouldn't be. And then all of a sudden I'm able to be a public speaker, and then I can, I can look for all these sightings of whenever I start getting in frustrating situations, then all of a sudden there's something given to me that kind of keeps me going. And I guess an example of that would be, at one point, I had to learn how to sit up and learn how to dress myself, do all those things again. And it was hard. And my twin sister was out being a teenager while I was stuck in the hospital. I was the last victim. There were 8 shot, 3 girls were killed. And I was the last person in the hospital, and I was still going to be there. I ended up spending 5 months in the hospital, but I knew I was going to be there for a long time. And so I got to the point where I was wanting to give up. I was like, this isn't fair. I've already learned how to do all this, and my twin sister gets to do life, and I'm stuck in this hospital. And then all of a sudden I started receiving tons and tons of letters. I received in just one day, this was the most, 600 letters and 45 packages from people all over the world. And my mom would sit by my bed and read them to me, whether I wanted to hear them or not. And then I started seeing that there was actually so much more good in the world, even though the negative shines and tries to, it looks like that's the biggest, but there was a lot of people that were positive and supportive to me. And I was like, I don't know these people, but they took the time to do this for me. And I think that, I was supposed to look for those things and to keep me going, that I'm being tested for things, and like, it's kind of like a test. Like I could make one decision versus another, which one was bad and which was good. And I guess kind of my motto, I wrote a book called I Choose to Be Happy, because I learned it's a choice. I could feel sorry for myself, but I knew that wasn't going to get me where I am today, where I have children. I have 2 boys. I'm a mom. I have a husband. I went to college and graduated and received a degree in social work. I did things in my life that I never thought I'd ever do. And so I can consider myself blessed. And then as long as there's a purpose for this, then I can handle it. And I think that's what, whatever that happened while I was there, that I was being told that these are the things that you need to do or look for to get through this. And then, to the point where you're done and you wake up, kind of thing. I don't know if that makes any sense.
What was the name of that school?
The school, Heath High School, in Paducah, Kentucky, is where it. So, if you look it up, if you look up Missy Jenkins Smith, if you Google me, you'll see a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube, like interviews and videos and stuff. If you look up, if you find a documentary called Going Postal, the first 15 minutes is about the shooting in Paducah. And I'm in it. I'm super young at that point, but it also has the shooter in there. It has the shooter's best friend. It kind of like tells a lot on the documentary. My principal's on there. My teacher that was with me that morning is on there. But she's now passed away from breast cancer. But a cool story about her, I'll add this really quick. I ran into her in the mall in Paducah when I was in college, and I was excited to see her. And I remember every year I would always give her like a poinsettia, because it was December 1st, just to thank her for being there for me. And, I felt like that was never good enough. There was nothing I could do that was good enough to, do what she did for me. And so she told me she had breast cancer. And I asked her if there's anything I could do. And she said, well, could you pray for me? And so I was just like, oh my gosh, I was able to be there for her in her time of need, at the worst time in her life, when she was there for me at the worst time in mine. And so, but she, I think about 5 or 6 years ago, she passed away. But she was she was an angel from, that was there to help me, and I didn't even know. Whenever I was trying to avoid her in my math class and hide and pray that she didn't call on me, that, and she was one of those teachers that were kind of like, would be hard on you. And she wasn't easygoing. She was like a tough teacher. So it was just awesome to kind of see those things that, my perspectives before this near-death experience versus after, how I'm doing things I never thought that I would do. I could sit on the outside before and say, being paralyzed my life would be ruined. It would be over. I would hate that. It would be terrible, but I don't, I guess you don't have things that you can't handle. I guess this was something that was going to be a challenge that I guess I was expected to be able to handle. Like I said, the words to describe this is hard. It's very hard. I feel like sometimes that I don't make any sense and that I'm talking in circles, but I know that that I learned purpose. I learned, what I'm supposed to be doing, even though I didn't hear those words or know who I was talking to. So
What do you think is happening now with the schools to make them safer?
I think that one of the things that is important is there's a lot of schools that try to cover or hide if things happen. And they try to live in that mentality of it's not going to happen here. We're fine. And that could be the worst thing ever. I'm not saying live in fear, but keep your eyes open of the things that are just blatant, like in your face, like that something could happen. Because in the shooting at my school, so sorry, hold on. The shooting at my school, the boy, he brought the gun 2 weeks to school before it happened. And he showed it to 2 boys. He pulled it out on them in the instrument room in the band room. And they laughed at him. And they told him that was just a 22 and that wouldn't do anything to anybody. Oh. He also told people something big was going to happen. You know, they talked about school shootings at lunch with the kids that he hung out with. I mean, there was a lot of things that people just ignored. And that was one of the things, that's what we did wrong. There was also, like, every single door to our school was always open. We didn't have a resource officer. I really truly believe that he would have thought twice about bringing a gun inside the school if there was someone that was like an authority, because he had an older sister who was actually best friends with my best friend that I rode with her older sister. It was her older sister, if that makes sense. But anyway, so he rode to school with her, and he put the guns wrapped up in blankets in her trunk, and he had the 22 and enough ammunition to shoot everybody in the school twice, in earplugs, 2 sets of earplugs in his backpack. And he, on the way to school, contemplated, should I bring this in? But he had told his sister that it was a project for, I think, English, or some kind of English project, and props for it. And so he was afraid she'd go back and get the stuff and then see it was guns. And so he brought them in. And so he walked in, and the band teacher stopped him and said, "Hey, what is that?" And he said, "Oh, it was just props for an English project." And he was like, "Okay, no reason to not believe him." And I would have done the same. He continued walking on, and then there was another student that stopped him and asked him what it was, and he told him the same thing, and he went on. That morning before he left the house, his mom asked him what it was, before his sister left, and when she let him put it in the trunk, she asked him what it was. So, and then right before, when he pulled the gun out, and you'll see in that documentary, his friend was there with him, and he thought, wait a minute, that's my dad's gun, when he pulled it out. And and it happened.
What happened to him?
Do what?
What happened to him?
Oh, he was sentenced 25 years to life with parole in 25 years. So this past September was his parole hearing. And there's been a lot. I mean, if you look at my book, I Choose to Be Happy, there's a lot of craziness that happened from the beginning until that sentencing. I had forgiven him for what he had done to me. And there's another thing, I had the ability to forgive, but I also had, I guess, like, knowing what forgiveness was, that it wasn't for him. It wasn't to exonerate him from the consequences of his actions, but it was so that I wouldn't have to deal with the consequences of his actions. I'm a happy person, and anger, I'm not, some people thrive off that. I don't. It makes me exhausted. I don't like to be angry. I like to be happy. And so forgiving and moving on, I was able to focus on myself and living my life. And so around my senior year, he tried to contact me. He wrote me letters, and he even called my house twice. I don't know how that could have happened, but I think he was trying to use me as like a tool for therapy in a way. But this second phone call, I was at a basketball game, and my dad answered the phone, and he asked for me, and my dad was like, "Well, she's gone. Can I ask who's calling?" And he said, "Michael." And then my dad got quiet, and he was like, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," over and over again. And then we got it stopped because it was my senior year. I was trying to learn to live my life. And then a little later on, I finally made the decision that I did want to talk to him. And so me and my twin sister went to LaGrange Penitentiary in Kentucky, where he's at. And we spoke to him for 2.5 hours. And I knew I wouldn't get a reason why, but I wanted to learn, to find out if he wished he would have made a different decision. Speaking to kids in schools, I wanted to at least bring that bit of like a powerful words that him saying, you know, I wish I didn't do this. I wish I would have asked for help and not held everything in, because he was, you know, he was bullied, and I'm not trying to blame bullying for it, but because it was his decision to do what he did. He didn't ask for help. He could have, but I think it kind of pushed him. And so, so at that point, when I talked to him, he did say that he regretted doing that. But he also started saying he was dealing with a mental illness. And so he had pled guilty, but mentally ill before the sentencing. Then after that, there was, I guess 4 or 5 times he tried to appeal his sentence and change it from, to not guilty for reason of insanity. But every single time he was denied. There was one appeal where they found that he was checking out books, like psychology books. His dad was a lawyer, so he was getting information from that. And his sister had a psychology degree, but she didn't have her license. So a lot of that was kind of pointed out. Also during that time, he was a part of, I don't know if you know what murderabilia is. It's these people on websites where they sell things from serial killers, like Charles Manson's fingernails, weird stuff like that. He had some things on someone's website. He couldn't profit off those things, but there's a law called the Son of Sam law where, you know, he couldn't profit, but there is someone profiting, the person that owns the website. And so it really bothered me that he was considering himself a serial killer. And it was like there was something up on the website that he was on. It was like a dating service thing, like a, you know, so what's your favorite ice cream? What do you see? You know, what do you see? Or, you know, what do you want in a girlfriend? Or things like that. And it was just his picture and he's smiling. And I was just like, what?
He's proud of it.
Yeah. And he was selling hand tracing, all these things. And so he did tell me he was sorry when I met with him. But I think that for him to consider himself that's a bit scary.
Right.
And so then fast forward, later on September was his parole hearing. And that was something that, you know, when you look back 25 years, it's a long time. It got here quicker than I ever thought. And so this was the point where we're like, is this person who attempted to murder me and murder my friends, or is he going to be getting out? And so, I mean, he could potentially, his parents lived in Northern Kentucky now. So the plan was for him to go home with them. And at this point, he's like 6 foot something with, so like 100 and something or 200 and something pounds, or he was huge when he was little before. And I was thinking, you know, his parents are older. They're not going to be able to force him to take his medications because he has a mental illness. And he only had a parole officer. He didn't even have like a monitor, like an ankle monitor. So he could come to my house if he wanted to. And then
did he serve his sentence in a mental hospital or a prison?
A prison. And he is
Okay.
in LaGrange. They after like the first there was a parole hearing for victims where they shared victim statements, and I wrote a 27-page victim statement, impact statement, and then I also spoke to the parole board on Zoom. It was Zoom. I always
He didn't
imagined
get out,
it
right?
to be, yeah, I always imagined it to be where they could see me in a wheelchair. I always felt like I was the representation of people still living with it, because there's people that saw what happened. You don't see physical scars, but they have those scars. Whether it's a teacher, whether it was a student who saw it, whether it was a student that got shoved into the gym and didn't know what in the world was going on. It could have been a paramedic. It could have been doctor, nurse, the custodians who had to clean it up afterwards. I mean, all of those things. I felt like my wheelchair was representing all of those people that don't have that, you know, sticking out right in front of them. And but thankfully I made sure that the Zoom had all of me in it. And so, you know, I told them a lot of the problems that I was having now that it's been 25 years after, you know, all of my injuries to my arms and you know, a lot of the things that I've struggled with. You know, there's been positives, but there's been a lot of struggle because my children, I feel bad at this point because they're kind of having to take care of me. They're 12 and 15, and I want to be the mom that's still taking care of them, those kind of things. But then the next day he had his parole hearing, and they after that, there was not a unanimous decision after his parole hearing, which to me, after hearing it, I was pretty sure that he wasn't going to get out, but based on what I heard. And that's actually on YouTube, about those hearings, the victim hearing and his parole hearing. And so since it wasn't unanimous, they met again the following Monday with like the entire parole board, because it was just two from the parole. And then at that point they had to just kind of give their vote, and it was unanimous for him to serve out his sentence. So he is now in LaGrange Penitentiary for the rest of his life. And he was 14 years old when he did this. It's crazy to me to think. Now he's 39. This coming June 1st, he'll be 40. But after that, and this is very ironic though, it's like I kind of, like it's those things again, those tests that I was telling you. After that happened, after the whole parole hearing was over, it was at the end of November. I substitute teach, since I have all these injuries and these issues with my physical abilities. I can sub and just go in whenever my body will let me, or when I feel like I can. And so basically I was subbing one day, and I was going down a ramp, and it was very steep, and I fell out of my wheelchair and I broke my femur. And this was on November the 29th, and I had surgery on December the 1st, the 25th anniversary
Oh my gosh.
of the shooting. And it was like, this wouldn't have been happening to me if I hadn't been shot. And then it gets weirder. I was in the hospital for a long time, and I got to get out on December the 1st. Back whenever I was in the hospital, the last victim besides myself, sorry, not December 1st, December 16th. The last victim left the hospital, and it was December 16th, and I was still there. I got to leave the hospital on December 16th. I know, like weird things like that just kind of, it's like reminded me of those things. But I think this was like another test. It was a frustrating situation. I'm still dealing with it right now. I can't drive right now. I've got this big brace on. It took me hours to get ready this morning, even more so because of it, my injuries and stuff. Now I've got to watch this broken femur. So it's like, and sometimes I'm like, what in the world? And I do throw my fits and I get aggravated, but then I put myself back into the reminder of like, there's so many positives in my life. I could be gone. This situation could be a lot worse than what it is. And then I get myself back to business, but I let myself freak out. And so I know that these are things that I was told to do. And I don't know, it's just how like in my face, and how these things, I can find them so easy to help me keep going, or to not let these things get me, is just beyond me. Like I'm glad that I'm able to handle them that way. There's a lot of people that don't believe that I'm not angry, or that I'm not, I would want to walk again. I'd rather be walking. But at the same time, I've learned so much from this. My life has been even more positive than it probably would have been. And I feel like I'm making an impact and doing something. And, so for that, I'm okay with being in the chair. But if it was to prevent, the girls who were killed and everything that was seen that morning, then yes, I wouldn't have ever wanted it to happen. But for my situation, I feel like it's what made my life what it is, if I'm making sense.
Yeah, you make perfect sense. I'm hoping that people that watch this just don't like, oh, okay, that's interesting, flip on the next NDE video.
Right.
I hope they show it to teenagers,
Yeah.
school-age children, and say, now listen to what she's saying. This boy was telling his friends and showing the gun to people.
Yes.
And if you see something, say something.
Exactly. exactly. And a lot of people are afraid of looking like a snitch or being a tattletale. But, I would rather, be wrong if that wasn't what was going to
Right.
happen than to have to live with what did happen. My best friend, another friend of mine who lived across the street, he was warned by him, told him something big was going to happen and not to come to prayer circle. And that morning he went to a basketball meeting. It had nothing to do with what the boy said. But then whenever he found out what happened and that I was shot, he was very devastated. And whenever I was in college, he was a year younger than me. He calls me crying and was just like, Missy, I'm so sorry. It's because of me that you're in a wheelchair. I wish that I would have said something. And then I told him, we didn't know back then. We didn't know how important it was to tell. But unfortunately we do now. And all we can do is just share the mistakes that we made. And
Was he mad at somebody in the prayer circle?
Now, what I think was going on, my battery's 10%, sorry. What I think was actually going on with him was that he was being bullied a lot. He was handling it all on his own. He thought no one would help him. And there's mental illness issues on his mom's side. And so I think that kind of brought it out. So because he even bullied other people. But I learned also that a lot of times when, bullies were victims at one time too. And I even remember seeing some things that happened. There was one thing, he was eating in the hallway. He was eating a package of donuts during lunchtime, and a boy came up to him and said, "Can I have them?" And so he gave him the donuts, and the boy crumpled them up and spit in them and threw them in his face. And so a lot of things like that would happen. But like I said, that's not an excuse. But I think that he thought,
you don't shoot people, you don't kill people and
and
paralyze people because somebody spit in your face.
Yeah, he wanted somebody to fear him and respect him. And I think that's why he brought the gun and pulled it out on the two boys in the instrument room. But when they laughed at him, he didn't get the reaction he wanted. So I think that's when he decided to go to the prayer circle, because that was not because we were praying, but that was like a central time where a ton of people were around, and he would have had to carry guns around with him all day long. It was right there. And he even, he always was outside the prayer circle, just kind of hanging out with some friends. So it wasn't out of the ordinary. But I think that whenever he pulled the gun out, I remember somebody saying at the 20-year anniversary, there was a girl that was in the prayer circle. She said, "I always feel so guilty," because she said, right before we started praying, I saw him pull the gun out of his backpack. And she said, but your brain goes into survival mode, and they're like, no, that's not what that is. And that's fake. And you ignore it. And so I think that when he pulled it out, that nobody reacted. And because his friend said, that's my dad's gun, when he pulled it out, because he actually stole the guns from his friend's house. And so when he pulled it out, there wasn't a reaction he thought he was going to get. And I think that's when he pulled the trigger. And after that, he went into shock, because the next thing he knew, or that he remembered, is that he quit shooting and he had the gun in his hand, and there was one bullet left. And there was a boy behind one of the concrete pillars that kind of separated the hallway from the lobby. And he was hiding behind it, but he was the prayer circle leader. And so he kind of popped his head out and was like, Michael, what are you doing? And he said, I don't know. I'm shooting people. And then he asked him to kill him. And he's like, I'm not going to do that. He asked the prayer circle leader to kill him. And he had set the gun down on his own. But my principal walked over, grabbed the gun and grabbed him and took him to the office where they could call the police. And, I could imagine being my principal and being the one expected to do that, which he had nothing to protect himself between the boy and this gun. But I think that he went into shock, and that's when he pulled the trigger. And I don't think he really knew who all he shot. But the very first person that I mentioned that he shot in the head was his best friend, and he didn't know it. But there was really nobody in the prayer circle that really gave him any problems, or there were people that were his friends. And there was a boy, I remember afterwards, he came up to me, somebody that was named whenever he was being interrogated. he was named as someone who made fun of him a lot. And the boy came up to me and apologized to me for doing what he did. And it's sad because, again, Michael made that decision to do this on his own. But that boy has to live with the feeling of, I contributed to this happening. It's partially my fault. So kind of like my friend and this boy here, I mean, those are things that they could have helped prevent it. And they have to live with those things now. And so it's preventable. You just got to look for them and take them seriously. And you can't have that mentality of, it doesn't happen here, because it can happen anywhere. And actually in our area, after the 20-year anniversary, we had a new dedication of a memorial. The county over from us that following January had a school shooting. Two people were killed, and there were many victims. And at that point, I was a counselor at a school still, and I had children. And I even remember crying and all upset. I thought, Missy, stop. You're not a victim of this. But I thought, no, that's when I realized there's victims everywhere. If you're affected by something like this, if you're scared, for your own children or whatever, you're victims of it, And so we were unfortunately able to, I guess, if this makes, it was kind of weird because when it happened in Paducah back in December 1st, there was nobody knew what to do or how to help. But the survivors from the shooting back then was able to help the survivors of this school shooting, and to kind of give them some hope and show them that even though it's affected our life, that we have PTSD, that things have happened that's, that we kind of considered weird because of what we went through, to validate them that it is okay and you still have a life after this, that you can still live your life and that there's purpose and it's not over. And even in the cases of almost like the worst case scenario of being paralyzed, my husband met me at a fraternity party, and he said one of the things that he noticed about me was that I was out and I was around people and I was smiling, and he said that's when he didn't see the wheelchair anymore. So I think it's important for the choices that we make every day, and to know that if we're going to succeed in life or whatever it may be, we need to make that choice and make the positive one.
Do you need to plug in? Are you dying?
Well, no, I don't know. Yeah, let me see. And it's about 6%. let me get my charger.
Okay, that's fine.
Oh, so sorry. And then somebody started calling my phone.
It's okay.
Spam. I need a new phone. It just drains too quick.
Mine does too. I think us NDEers drain our batteries too, whether it's a watch or a cell phone.
Yeah. And I've had this phone for a while. I deserve a new one. Okay, almost got it.
I've learned to keep myself calm down when I'm talking to another NDEer, because sometimes I get too excited and my computer will freeze.
Yeah.
They're like, calm down.
I use too many hands. I'm a hands talker. So I know I've got a lot of hands going on.
That you're getting excited?
Yeah, I'm talking with my hands.
Yeah,
All
me
right,
too. Sometimes I sit on my
whenever
hands, so calm down.
Whenever I speak, I'm always just like, okay, I need a handheld mic because I need something to do with my hands. All right, I just got it. Gotta reach it.
That's okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. I have a disabled sister. She's mentally disabled, but so I'm used to we make accommodations.
You're right. Having to, yeah, exactly. Well, my twin sister, she last month fell and fractured her hip, and she has to use a wheelchair too. So that was
Oh my
kind of funny.
goodness.
Both of us are in wheelchairs, and I was like, sorry, I'm the senior disabled person. So, I was like, okay, I think it hopefully worked. Sometimes, is it charging? I don't know.
While you're doing that, I'll say, when you mentioned a while ago that, what was it? somebody felt bad later because before you started praying, they actually saw the gun and like, they don't know why they didn't say anything. And I thought, I get that, because when I worked at Children's Services, it was like about 25 years ago. I was in a van with people from the prosecutor's office, supervisor of Children's Services. We had a meeting uptown about something, and we were headed back, which is like a 5-minute drive to the agency. And as we were driving back, here come all these cops flying, passing us. And we're like, what's going on? I just had a feeling something just happened to the agency. And when we pulled in, all these cops are at the agency, and they all get out and go in the agency. And I'm hiding, I get in the back seat and I hide underneath it.
Yeah.
It wasn't clicking.
They were still going. You're just like, carry on. Because my twin sister said that when she left the lobby, my twin sister, she was heading towards the gym. But before that, the person that was getting CPR in the ambulance with me, it turned out to be one of our friends. And she passed her, but she had a coat on and the hood was over her head. And my twin sister said she remembered just like walking by her and then nonchalantly saying, "There's a dead body," and then walking on. But she'd always wondered who it was, and then it was our friend. I mean, things like that. And then my friend who is grazed on the shoulder that my sister went to check on, because the girl that had the hood over her head, she was actually shot in the back of the head. And it came out of her nose. And my friend, Kelly, had to identify her. So she has that image of our friend in her head for the rest of her life. And I can imagine. So, I mean, there was a lot of things that, that anybody shouldn't go through. It's like war, like even, an adult, a child, no one should be going through something like that. And it's preventable. And I would, I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want any kind of metal detectors or people going through my things, but
I do. I want my grandchildren protected to the hilt.
Yeah. I want my privacy. I'll have that taken away all day long because I've got nothing to hide.
I want to know they're safe.
Exactly. To know that, and unfortunately, that's the time we live in. Things change. It's not the same right now in 2023 than it was in 1901 or whatever. Things are different.
And I actually heard a shooter after the fact say, I didn't go to this school and that school because I knew there was armed guards.
Yeah. Exactly. And so, I mean, and that's another thing that frustrates me is people, upset about cops or think that, I really believe that we would have been better off. And there's a resource officer that asked me to come speak, and he also endorsed one of my books. He's from Arkansas, which was close to Jonesboro, Arkansas, the shooting that happened right after the shooting at my school. And so he makes such a wonderful change for the kids. I mean, when he shows them love, and they do something called like cop car karaoke, and they do fun things with them, and he's trusted. And so, not all cops are bad people. Again, it's like that bad stuff shines.
Right.
And tries to shine itself. And there are good things in the world. And you can find those things if you don't focus on those bad ones, And
I believe because of what just happened in Michigan at the university.
Yeah.
We lived near there. I was going to go to law school at Cooley, and it's right close to that law school. And, what happened there that in West Virginia now is you can carry in West Virginia at the universities. And I'm like, nobody's going to start stuff because it's going to be like Cowboys and Indians. They're just going to take them out right now. It's not going to go far.
It's very frustrating too. Like, because I've even, I worked in a school, people were like, hey, did you leave your school? Did you go to a different one? Or, are you scared to go into schools? You can't live in fear, but it can be anywhere now. That's what it could be in church. It could be at a restaurant. It could be anywhere. And that's, to me, it's a scary thing, but you still got to look for those signs. You can't ignore and say, it's not going to happen to us. So,
and when that happened at first movie theater in Colorado years ago, I'm still uneasy in a movie theater. And I like to go days when it's not busy, like through the week and stuff, because I don't want to go when there's a crowd.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people that have been through something like this, and not even like through something like this, or just the thought you have to plan out escape routes. I've done that before. Like if I'm in a situation that doesn't feel very comfortable, you know, and PTSD is weird too. I was speaking in a school, and this isn't even how the situation happened in the shooting at my school, but I was just speaking in the gym, and this boy walks in. He had a backpack, but it was at the end of the day. He like kind of busted in loudly because he probably came from some classroom taking a test, or he was, I don't know what, but he was just coming in to listen. And all I could do was focus on him. And all I could do was think, something's up with him. What do I do? Somehow I was able to continue speaking. I don't know how I was, but it was something that all of a sudden triggered me. So, you know, yeah. And it's, you know, it's kind of crazy, but you know, those are things.
I went to see Jesus Revolution here a few weeks ago, and there was a guy, and no, it was before Jesus Revolution. I went to see a movie before that, and there was a guy that had on bright red tennis shoes and a bright red jumpsuit, you know, like the jogging pants and shirt.
Yeah.
And then he was wearing a black long overcoat like Western. And I'm thinking, these two things don't go together. The red, like gangster with the jumpsuit and the shoes, but then a Western style long coat, like a cowboy.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, will he wear that to cover up guns or something?
Yeah.
And he looked at me so funny. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, it could have been nothing, but I just got the creeper feeling, you know, and he went out and he bought a ticket or something. He bought something concession, but then he walked back out and never seen him again. But yeah, I get those too. It's like,
and I think that we have that intuition that tells us, you know, something's going on. And this is a weird story I just forgot about, but I guess it was my freshman year or the summer before my sophomore year is what it was. There was a lot of kids in my neighborhood, and me and my twin sister, when they walked out, we're on the front porch, and my friend that I mentioned before that was warned by him, he was across the street and he had a BB gun. And my neighbor, the boy that was lived next to us, he had a BB gun, and they were shooting at each other. And my twin sister walks over and she's like, "What are you guys doing?" And he's like, "Stay behind me," you know. And so all of a sudden he was like, "Oh, I'm out of bullets." And he'd been over and she got shot in the thigh. I was on the porch and I was watching, and all of a sudden I'm like, the thought in my head was like, I'll never get shot. And I was like, why did I just think of that? That was really weird. Why did I just say that? It was like a kind of like a warning. And then during Thanksgiving break, before it happened, I begged and begged and begged my mom to let me drive my a car, because I was about to turn 16 Christmas Eve that month. And that's all I could think about was trying to learn how to drive and to get my license and not have to ride the bus anymore. And that's why I was making sure I didn't miss that ride for my best friend's older sister. And I remember my mom telling me, "Nope, you got to be 16. You got to have your permit." And then I said, "Mom, please, what if something happens to me?" And so, I mean, it's crazy. And even right before the shooting, right before we started to pray, I asked my friend who was grazed if she'd go to the bathroom with me. And she said, "Let's just say for prayer circle really quick, and then we'll go." And I didn't have to go to the bathroom. I just wanted to look at my hair. But so then that's why I was just like, okay, you know, because I'd gotten myself ready so fast. And then I always kind of ask myself, why didn't I ask my twin sister to go with me? Why was, you know, but I almost believe that if I wasn't there, that bullet that scraped my sister's neck, it could have killed her. She was going towards me, who I was already on the ground. And so, you know, the decisions that we make and how your life, the way your life goes, it's kind of like almost like a computer game or something. Is what, like, you know, are you going to do this? Or are you going to do that? And then kind of what happens next. I think there was a movie that was like that on Netflix where you can make the choices.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I felt like it was. You know, it's crazy.
Before I went to law school in Cooley, which I didn't end up going. We had a tragedy happening. I didn't end up going there, but I was searching for what law school do I want to go to. We had visited Grundy, Kentucky. Wasn't it Grundy, Jim? My husband can hear me. I think it's Grundy, Kentucky.
I've never heard of that. Is it Eastern?
And law school. And we were walking around the halls. All of a sudden, I got a creepy feeling. And I could like see all these people rushing. It was empty halls. And I could feel like these people rushing and like some, like, we didn't really think about shooters back then, but like
Yeah.
some kind of mayhem, something dangerous happening here.
Ooh.
Like, was it Grundy, Kentucky, Jim? Yeah. And I was like, I don't want to go to school here. I don't trust this place. I'm getting a bad vibe. Get me out of here. And I end up going, getting to Michigan. And then we had a tragedy right before I was to go. And so I ended up not going. But yeah, I thought later when Grundy had a shooting like that. And I'm like, I would have been there. I would have been a student if I would have chose that instead of this one.
Yep. Gosh. Whenever I was graduating and getting ready to go to college, during my senior year, I had lived in Los Angeles for about half a year. I was given the opportunity to learn how to use a brace to help me walk. And so there was a doctor that developed that, and he lived in Los Angeles and wanted me to come down and learn how to walk in it so that I could walk across the stage for graduation. And so I was actually lost into LA. I wanted to go to USC. I was convinced that I was going to be a actress, the authentic girl in a wheelchair. If there's a paralysis part in a movie, I got this because I'm the real thing. That's in my head. And I was about to get an agent. I had headshots. And then my older sister actually ended up meeting a guy, and that's where she lives now. She met her husband, and then me and my twin sister wanted to go to USC, and she didn't want 3 out of 6 of her kids all the way to California, lose them to California. And me and my twin sister are her babies. And so she said, please go to Murray State University is where we went.
She wanted to spread you out.
Which was only 45 minutes away from home. And I had always said, I'm never going to Murray, and because it's too close to home. And then I did. And then I said, I don't want to live here. There's not even a mall. I never want to live here. And I've lived here since I went to college here. So I always wonder, I have my husband and my kids because I met my husband in college. What would have happened if I went to Los Angeles? And, would I even still be alive? Would I have been killed because of something in college? Like, I think that at that time, like, rape cases and crime were kind of up at USC at the time. And I remember discussing that, like, that was one of the negatives about the school. So, anything could have happened. I may not have finished there. I may have been divorced 5 times and had 10 kids and never got a degree and didn't know what my purpose was in life. Who knows, but, it's crazy how the decisions you make and how it goes.
Made me think, my husband was actually just talking the other day how we were in Colorado, see, like 08 and 09. He was working there because there was no work around here for a while. And so we moved the kids and we rented a house for a year, and he worked there. And so I thought, well, I'm here. I'll just apply to the sheriff's department. And during the interview, there's 2 detectives interviewing me. And they're like, we want you working with us. We don't want just you hired. We want you working with us. Like, they really wanted me. And I went through the rest of this stuff. And then I ended up not taking the job. And we moved back. And then later on, I believe it was a theater shooting. And my husband was like, you would have been working there. You could have been, investigating all that. Yeah. And I used to work at an emergency department, and people come in and, bad car wrecks and things. And I realize now I wouldn't have coped well with seeing that kind of stuff, investigating that kind of stuff. I'm too sensitive.
Well, and I think even because the paramedic that was with me in the ambulance, and that was one of the things I learned about their job, just because they're in that job doesn't mean that these type of things don't affect them in some way. Because there were 2 other paramedics that I was speaking in a church. You could just see the hurt in their eyes. And it was sad, and I felt so sorry for them, and how they hurt, because I guess they were involved with one of the girls that had passed, and it's like they didn't do their job kind of feeling. So, even though that's their job, doesn't mean that they're always that, comfortable with everything. And then with you're definitely not, because that's not the kind of thing you can do. And I can't do blood. So, I'm glad that there are people willing to do those things, like nurses are willing to do certain things in the hospital I'd never want to do for somebody,
Yeah,
But
when I was just out of high school, well, it was actually during my senior year. I got out early. My first job was nurse's aide at a nursing home, actually where my sister, and my mother's at now. But
Mhm.
I would sit and cry with those people if they were in pain. I would sit and cry, and they'd
I
say,
couldn't do
"Honey,
nursing
there's nothing
home.
you can do." I just felt so bad.
Yeah,
And I'm not cut out for it.
I know. I would probably like have a relationship with somebody and be like my second grandma, and then they're gone. I would cry all the time. I couldn't handle that. I did. But there was a class I took in college where we had to do part of the semester with preschoolers, and then the last of the semester was with people in nursing homes, and it was just so sad and crazy about the degrees that these people what they were going through. There was a lady with dementia who was like physically amazing, but she was completely gone. She would look outside the window and she'd be talking about whatever was outside the window, like what she had seen outside her window when she was in her 30s. And so she would talk about that, or when she was a kid. And there was another lady who was her roommate, and she was mentally there, but she was blind and she couldn't walk and she was stuck in her bed. And so it was just crazy, like some of the things that those people, that like have to deal with at the end of life. And I don't think I could handle it watching all that at all. Mm-mm, definitely not. So there's people there, thank goodness, that are angels and willing to be there for people during that time because they need them. But I
It
don't.
just sounds like, how you felt when this all was happening, and then we come back to your NDE, and it just seems like this grace was given
Yes.
for you to be calm and okay.
Mhm. And to know that everything's going to be fine, and to look for those encouraging signs to make your to continue your life the way you want it to be. It's my twin sister, everything that she got to do, I got to do too, and that was motivator. But I think that you know knowing that knowing exactly that I had to do this in order to get what I wanted out of life, it made sense. And I think some people, I guess it's easy for them to fall into the feeling sorry for themselves and my life is over. But it will be over when you have that mentality. I know it's not easy. You got to get through that aggravation, but you also got to remind yourself that there are positives that you have. It could always be worse. And, like I met a guy who had ALS, and he knew he was going to pass away soon at some point. And I remember the last time I saw him, he couldn't talk, he couldn't move. All he could do was move his eyes. And I could tell, like, even when he looked at me, he said hello with his eyes. That was the last time I saw him, and he never got to hold his grandson. So to me, that's like, that's so much worse than what I'm dealing with. I have my arms, I can talk. I held my babies. I took care of my babies, even though they tried to run away from me and take advantage of mom being in a wheelchair. But I had babies. I had that moment, and it could be worse.
And I bet you
Definitely.
didn't have any pain during labor, did you?
And now, actually, it's kind of crazy. Anything that happens below my injury, um, it causes a reaction to my body, and it's called autonomic dysreflexia. That's the only medical term I know, and I like to throw it around because it makes me sound like I'm super smart. But what happens is that if there's something happening below my injury, it could be that I have a cut on my leg or something like being burned on my leg, something, my body will react in certain ways. It might be that I get the chills. I might get like flushed in the face and hot. My blood pressure will start going up. And so until you fix the problem. So whenever I had my first son, I had to have an epidural. Even though I couldn't feel it, you still had to paralyze the paralyzed part because it has a brain of its own. It does its own thing. I don't control it. I control the top half, but the bottom half, it's its own thing. And so that does affect me otherwise. So whenever I had my second child, they didn't give me the epidural in time. And I felt it in my head. It was the worst headache I'd ever had in my life. All I could do was scream. It hurt so bad. Yeah, it was so bad. And my blood pressure was so high that my husband was like, I was afraid I was going to be a single parent. I thought I was going to lose you. And it could cause a stroke or a seizure if you don't fix the problem. So, and that was the worst I ever had it. When I broke my femur, I just got these chills. which to me was crazy because when I picked my leg up, I could feel it crunch. It was, oh,
You could feel that. I was wondering if you felt
yeah.
anything when it broke.
Now there's a few paralyzed perks. So there's not many, but yeah, but the femur, I heard that was the worst break you could have. I didn't feel it. Thank goodness. And then whenever I take advantage of, like, I hate needles, I hate IVs, put it in my leg, give me a shot in the leg. You know, I try to use that paralysis. You know, if it's going to be given to me, if this is what I got, then I'm going to use it, you know. But yeah, it's kind of weird how the body, what it does. And even, like, you know, not having to have a C-section, I talked to my doctor about it, and he was just like, it's nature. That's what your body just does. And so it happened. And he even told me to push, and I didn't even know if it worked or not, but you know, they were born. My first one was born in like 5 minutes. He told me to start pushing at 10:05, and by 12, or not 10:05, sorry, 12:05, and by 12:10 he was born. And I was more tired from waking up in the morning than I was having him. It was crazy. Definitely crazy. And my doctor, he came from one of the Carolinas, and he had previously had patients that was paralyzed. So he was used to that. And then after I had my second child, he was then relocated somewhere else. So he was there long enough for me to have my children, which I thought was crazy. You know, I was blessed. It was just like, that was another, I guess, God sent her a message saying, it's going to be okay. Here you go. You're going to be fine. And I think learning how to walk in my brace my senior year, that was, hey, look, you know, you still get to do it. Let's top off high school at terrible time and make it, you know, show that I beat it. I walked across the stage. I didn't have to roll, you know, those kind of things. Even when I got out of the hospital, I was so concerned and worried about my abilities and what I could do, and if people would treat me different. And I was going to be the only person in a wheelchair. And also, everyone saw me walking at school, and now I was going to be in a wheelchair, and I didn't know how it was going to be. But by the time in the summer, I went to a camp where I learned how to water ski, jet ski, ride a horse, climb a tree, and then I realized I did more in a wheelchair than I ever did walking. And so you have to look for those things, and it can kind of guide you on in life, and you can continue moving on. So it didn't have to be so bad that that change was in my life, and that it was going to be different, because there was something else that was going to come to show me that I could still do and live my life. And I probably wouldn't have known anything about that if I chose to be negative and said, no, I don't want to go to that camp. I'd just rather stay home and just stay in and let nobody see me because I'm not okay with the way I am. So
a few years ago, I broke my leg, just stepped off a little curb and fell. And I knew it was broke because it felt like glass, like a big long piece of glass every time I try to stand. Like, and they say, well, try to stand. I'm like, I already know it's broke. I already tried it once. I'm doing it again. And so I was in a wheelchair for a while, just when we go to the grocery store, because I couldn't maneuver those crutches very well at all. And I fell and hurt my knee worse than my broken leg with the crutches. So, but I got that feeling for a few months of having people look at you and not look at you the way they treat you when you're in a wheelchair. It's strange. It was very strange.
But, you know, it's kind of weird though, but I think that I didn't really notice people like staring at me or anything like that. I honestly didn't. Right before the shooting happened, I remember going to the movie theater in the town I lived in Paducah, and I saw a person in a wheelchair, and of course I was like, oh, don't look at them, because if I look at them, then I'm staring at them. And so it was like a very awkward thing. And then when I was in a wheelchair, I was just like, I don't know why it's such a big deal. And honestly, I didn't really notice some things. My twin sister noticed more than I did, but people ask you some of the craziest things or whatever, you know. But I think I'm so open about talking about my paralysis because I was the only person that I knew that was paralyzed, that I want to share it, because I didn't know. It was all news to me when this first happened to me. So.
And I kind of felt like when I was just, like I say, a couple months in a wheelchair, that help is appreciated. I don't know about everybody else is in there long term, but I really appreciate any help anybody would give me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, in the beginning, I was able to do a lot of things on my own, and sometimes it would take longer. Like if somebody was like, "Hey, let me put your wheelchair together," I would let me do it, because it would take longer for me to teach them and a person that I didn't know than it would be me doing it. Now that I'm in the situation I'm in, I welcome it with open arms, and we can take as long as we need to, because it's hard now. It's definitely hard now, and I need help from other people. And it never bothered me when somebody asked me, and if you need help, and then I said, no, I'm okay. I'm glad they acknowledge that. To me, I think it's messed up when they don't acknowledge that to somebody. But one of the things that drove me crazy is that whenever I said no and they continued on anyway, that was frustrating. But to ask makes you, that's just the kind thing to do. And if I would do the same if I was passing someone that looked like they were they were struggling.
Yeah, if you're in a chair and you're reaching for something on a shelf you can't get, ask if can I help?
Every time at a grocery store, I want the thing on the top. I know. So I have to come up with different things. Like I had to carry a clothes basket in my lap when I would go grocery shopping, because whatever they had at the grocery store wasn't going to work for me if I was by myself. And so, or I would eventually, I would have go down the broom aisle and get a broom. And if there's something I need, then you have to kind of create your own grabber. You have to kind of become very inventive with things, for sure.
And also too, I hope that people would realize what you said about the shooter, how it sounded to me, maybe I'm wrong. It's like, he kind of was like, what am I doing? And told someone to shoot me. It's that maybe it'd be nice if maybe these shooters would, while they're in prison, make up some kind of Zoom talk and say, this is what I was thinking. Now look what I've done to people.
Yeah. And to say if they would have wished they didn't do what they did. But there also are a lot of shooters nowadays that kill themselves. It's very rare to find a school shooter or shooter involved that's still alive. The shooting that happened before Paducah, the boy that was in that shooting, I met a girl, or she contacted me on Facebook, and so I met through only on phone and Facebook that I talked to her, because we had that unfortunate bond of being shot in a school shooting. And so whenever the parole hearing was going on with my situation, because he was the first school shooter for anything like that, or could have had a chance to get out, because the two boys from Jonesboro, Arkansas, there were two middle school boys. By the time they turned 18, they were released from prison because of their age and the law that Arkansas had at the time. But that I forgot about that situation. But for him to be in jail for this long length of time, and then given the opportunity, the shooter from Mississippi, the shooting previous, he was going to have a parole, I guess, later on in life, when he's 50, is when he'll be offered parole. And the girl was just like, I see what you're going through now with the concern and worry. Not really, I was worried for myself, but my kids were scared, that he would come to our house, or he could do things, something like that. And so she's like, that's going to happen eventually with us when he's 50 years old. And so it's like, she was still kind of, she was very interested and invested in what was going to happen in this situation. So it's
last year, the Parkland trial, I think it's the one that just went on last year forever. I think it's Parkland.
Oh yeah. Oh, the floor. Oh, was it? No, it wasn't the floor. Was it Nicholas Cruz or?
Yeah.
I think so. Yes.
Was that Parkland? I don't know. I think.
I can't remember. Yeah, I think so. I can't remember.
I felt so bad for the families and the people, the victims that had to testify what they went through.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, that was one of the things that he pled guilty but mentally ill, so we didn't have to go through any kind of trial. And he said he didn't want to put us through that. But then when he started appealing, we didn't have to get up or anything like that. But we had to go and watch him try to find a way to get out. It was like changing his plea to, not guilty for reason of insanity. I mean, there'd be mental health hospital. And then if he's taking medications and seems to be functioning, then I guess he gets to live life outside whenever there's, a lot of people having to live the rest of their lives with what he decided to do that day. Consequences. That's why I said consequences should stick, because I mean, if he was let go, I really think that would have sent the wrong message for people to think, oh, it's not going to be forever. Because at 39, 40, he still had the potential to have a family and kids and whatever, that could happen. The 3 girls that died in the shooting at my school, they don't have that. They never got to, they will forever be 17, 15, and 14 and didn't get those chances. So, that decision that he made is ultimately something that he needs to pay consequences for as well.
And they're like domestic violence cases, like the Chris Watts, his wife and his 2 little girls, they're victims. It's violence. It's somebody gets something in their head that whatever they're feeling and wanting is more important than anybody else.
And that's not true at all. Because, Michael, the shooter at my school, regrets what he did. He ruined his life. And I think he really, when the parole hearing was going on, I really think he didn't want to get out. I think he knew that the world wasn't going to be a very forgiving place. It wasn't a good place for him when he was 14, and he was trying to take everything all on his own at his age and trying to find a job and trying to live life with the decision he made. There's no way that this world would be very forgiving for him, that would be easy.
He ruined his life, but he ruined a lot of other people's too.
And I'm afraid that there would be a future victims because of mental illness and him being stressed out. I can only see him acting out or quit taking his medication or something, and then there's somebody else that's hurt or in a situation like before. Because really the 2 boys from Jonesboro, Arkansas, one of the boys, they were on strict orders of like not to have guns and things like that. One of the boys reoffended and was put back in prison. And so right there, I'm sure that they didn't have a forgiving world either that they were in. They I think they stayed around the town because the school resource officer I mentioned earlier, he said that he would go to like a restaurant and he's seen one of them out there before. But the one that he had seen, he actually, I guess it was a couple of years ago, got in a car accident in Carbondale, Illinois, and died. He was killed. And the other one's in jail. So it's crazy.
You need to start paying attention in the schools and families for that. We call it murder metaphilia, or however you say that word. Like when they see that they're enjoying that kind of thing.
Oh, I know.
With the video games or the drawings or whatever.
If you look up I'll have to send you a video from YouTube. I was on a show, Anderson Cooper. He had a top day talk show. I don't think he has it anymore, but it was I was on that show of his, and it was kind of messed up. I mean, there were 3 guys from these websites that have those websites, and I told them, I was just like, you guys are celebrating and getting excited over something that caused my life to change forever, and you're celebrating it like it's a good thing. And I said, now that you've met me and what I've gone, what I deal with every day, do you realize or change your mind about celebrating this? And they were like, no, because they were like, people collect war memorabilia or whatever. They were trying to connect it with other things. These are things, nasty things like hair clippings and toenail clippings and fingernail clippings and dirt and weird stuff. There was a woman that was on the show with me too. Her boss strangled her, and so he had his tracing of his hand on to be sold. And there's a picture of the shooter at my school, and it says Red Rum on the picture, and it's going for like $500.
Well, we ask, how did this get to be cool? Well, look at the movies. Look at Hollywood.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
Because any movie that shows a gun on the front, I'm not going to go watch it. This pow, 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 pow stuff, I cannot stand it.
Well, you'll find if you watch Going Postal, the shooter's friend, his name is Toby. He is talking about an incident where they were watching a movie at his house, and they were watching the movie Basketball Diaries. And in that movie, it's about a boy and his friends. They live in Chicago. He goes to a Catholic school, but they get involved with drugs. And on a drug binge, he like has this a fantasy that he walks into the Catholic, like what his class, he's wearing a trench coat and he's killing kids, shooting them. And after the movie, he looked at his friend Toby and said, I wish I could do that to some of the guys that mess with me. And then Toby was just like, I just thought he was blowing off steam and that he was just, and so, I think being a male too, he couldn't even get like a friend to kind of react to him about it. I saw a lot of that, but, I really wish that, I never knew this stuff was going on with him. And if I would have known, I would have wished that I would have wanted to listen or help. But bullying is such a tough subject that even whenever I saw those things happening, I should have gotten involved, but too many people don't want to get involved because then they're next, or or be associated with it, or it's such a hard topic to deal with that they'd rather ignore it than to take care of it or deal with it. But I've really found that a lot of times the bullies were victims themselves, and that they're the ones with the problem, and that's why they're treating others bad.
Yeah.
So they don't focus on there.
We can, have bad things happen to us, and therefore we can recognize when bad things happen to other people and try to help instead of saying that I'm going to, and I think those movies can get you wrapped up into you're justified into like even me, if I see a movie and this girl's being raped and then later she gets her revenge, I catch myself, yes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've crossed over.
Yeah. And it becomes reality to people when it shouldn't be at all. Definitely.
They're bringing us to the water, making us drink of the violence.
Yeah. And some kids just live like constantly like screen time and watching that stuff. And they're, the internet is right there for everybody to have, like we didn't have when we were growing up. We didn't see all this stuff or the time we live in now is so much scarier and open for kids to be influenced and not to, to get lost in those things. Like if their stuff is going on in their life and then they make that their reality because what they're living is not good for them, but that they enjoy. And so it's scary. Yeah. There were other things too. Like, some video games he'd played. There's different things that kind of came out. There was a book by Stephen King. It was called Rampage. He had that book in his locker, but now Stephen King took it off the shelves. So there's not, and I never read the book, so it's hard to find, but I think it has something to do with, violence, obviously. And it's just kind of crazy,
And boys tend to gravitate, usually it's boys that do this, so they gravitate towards those guy things that, most girls probably wouldn't read that book or watch that movie. Or we don't identify with those kind of savage stuff like boys do. They're looking for their manhood.
Exactly. And I think that's where he couldn't express his feelings about what he was going through because there was nobody, like if he expressed his feelings, that guys aren't supposed to do that. They're supposed to suck it up. Yeah.
It seems like when girls are bullied, they commit suicide. I mean, guys do too, but it seems like, the girls, you find out where they were bullied, well, this is how she handled it. Yeah.
It's more verbal. And then the boys were more physical. Yeah. I didn't never experience bullying a lot in my life, but I remember a time in 7th grade and like all through my life, I've struggled with weight. I've been every size you can think of. And now I'm at my largest size because of the surgeries and not being able to exercise in my shoulders and being 41, like your whole age makes a difference. But right before my 7th grade year, I remember I exercised, I ate right, and I was growing up, and so I lost a lot of weight. And I expected the first day of school, when I walked into my first class, for everybody to say, Missy, you look amazing. That's awesome. And so I walked into the classroom And the first thing I noticed was that I didn't really know anybody that was close to. There wasn't a close friend. So I didn't really know where to sit. And I was just kind of like looking around. And the teacher was out in the hallway, posted looking for bullying and watching for, like issues. And so there was a group of girls off in the corner. And one of the girls turned around and looked at me. She was like the mean, popular girl. Like everybody liked her because they feared her. And so she turned around and looked at me and she said, "Missy, are you anorexic?" And at that point, I thought, I've always been too big and now I'm too skinny. When am I going to be good enough for anybody?
Right.
And I kind of developed eating problems. And then later on in life, I ran into her in Walmart, like when we were adults. And we had kids at that point, and she was super nice. And all I could think about was that day that she made me feel terrible. Because all I said to her when she asked me that question, I was just like, no, and then sat down. And I had the worst year of a class that I really went close to. I just felt outside, like an outsider. It was terrible. And I prayed. I told myself, I was like, this is silly. That was in 7th grade. Why is this bothering me? Why am I looking at her and then thinking that's all I can think of? I want that to go away. But I think that's the power in our words. When we do things to people and we don't consider how it can affect them, it can affect people for the rest of their lives. And so I learned that. And I can imagine going through it every day. So treating people with kindness is important.
Yeah. And then again, I get irritated on the news when they say, was he bullied? What was he going through? It's like, nobody cares. If he wanted to come and talk to people about that before he did this, then give the boy sympathy. But when you do something, don't ask why.
It may not have, and it may not have changed the situation. That's whenever I tell my story, because you're my counselor today, by the way. My situation didn't change. I'm still paralyzed, but I'm not living with it alone. And it's kind of empowering me to push through it. He could have asked for help. He didn't have to live with it alone, which caused him to make bad decisions. And now he has to live the consequences of it for the rest of his lives, and others do too. So,
in January of 1979, my senior year, I had enough credits. I had to go back to school, but I had to go back and graduate in June. Mm-hmm. And I was feeling really proud for the first time in my life because I had got a nice tan. I was working. I could afford a nice dress. I never had even a nice prom dress before. And so I'm feeling really, just rented a house. I'm very independent. And everybody else just now graduating, hadn't moved out yet, right?
Yeah.
So I'm feeling really good. And I'm standing there in my white silky spaghetti strap dress, my white, the graduation gown and all. And all the girls start picking on me, which, they always did before, but now they're like going full force because they were jealous of who I was dating. Everybody wanted to date them. And so what they did is they're calling me a hoe. I hope you're on the pill. You're going to get pregnant. You're this, you're that, put me down, all of them making fun of me. And I had to hear this all through the line and then sitting down, waiting for everybody got quiet for it to start. And then as soon as they called my name, I'm thinking, as I start to walk down the aisle, I'm thinking, I'm done with school and all this bullying, and I'm going to walk into my new life. Well, guess what happens? My brother in the bleachers starts barking like a dog, calling me a dog. And now it's all quiet. So that's all you hear is barking and calling me a dog.
Oh, that's embarrassing.
One guy comes in, the girls, so they knew who they meant. And so we went to the bleachers. I just want to get out of here and go. But no, you go back to the bleachers, sit down, take the group picture for the senior class. And I had this long dark brown hair and I had this long face. I'm so sad. And I said, I just want to get out of here. It's like prison, like just let me out. And the photographer, I realized he had heard it all. He's seen it all. And he was mad. And he said, he pointed to me. He pointed to me and he says, you up front. And he had me get up closer. I didn't go clear up front, but I moved up a little. And I could tell that he was not happy with the bullying. What'd you say?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm glad that he didn't just let it go and ignore it, because that's a situation where people don't know how to handle it. What do you do? Like they start questioning, did she do something to them, and that's why they're acting that way?
I didn't say a word.
Yeah, I know, and you could say
today
that
I'd be a different person. I'd be getting in trouble because I would be giving it back.
Yeah. But that's why whenever I speak to kids, I tell them, don't be a bystander, because that's what I was. You know, when you see these things, I help people. They need that witness, because you know that person does not deserve whatever the bully is saying to them,
Yeah,
and
they should
the
have a
bully
mental
needs
health
help
class.
himself.
Yeah, they
Do
need a
what?
mental health class. They need a mental
Yeah,
health class in every grade.
yeah, I
In every
agree.
grade, a mental health class. I mean, they could,
Mhm.
find,
To talk
these
about emotions.
problems. Huh?
Yeah,
Even
definitely
learning
talk about emotions.
problems.
Hmm. I agree. Definitely. And I think that maybe if they would have, that was introduced to say, hey, you can talk, then I know it would help. You know, for the past 25 years, I've been talking about the shooting. And throughout the years, I've noticed that that's how I'm probably able to focus more on the positive, that I don't have to dwell on that, because it's not in my head and ready to blow up like it was with the shooter, what he was going through. You know, I couldn't imagine, but there were people that would have helped him. He just didn't want to ask because he didn't think no one was there for him. Because
And,
he even
I
said, like,
don't,
the group of friends he would,
and I don't know, of course,
oh,
but,
the group of friends, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, the group of friends that he stood with, outside the prayer circle, he would always say, I stood there, but I didn't really know if they were really my friends. I just stood there. But they considered him as a friend. I mean, he was very negative about himself, and I think it's just, he was constantly compared to his sister. She was valedictorian of her senior class. I mean, there was a lot of contributing to, self-esteem, but he could have asked for help. He still could have done that.
And that's not how you make friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not how you look better.
Not at
That's
all.
not how you get more popular.
Yeah. And I think that even, I mean, like, I'm surprised that, like, even his parents and his sister didn't see this kind of stuff happening, or that, like, things were weird, because he would, I guess, write stories that were very, like, violent and kind of crazy, but they looked at it and they're like, oh, he's just being creative. But it was like creepy stuff, like stuff that was not okay. So you know, but at the same time, I was around him too. I thought he was fun to be around. I never would have thought he would have done that either. But I also wasn't close enough to him to know how he was handling what he was dealing with, because he was making fun of people too. And he actually did that with me and my twin sister. He had, we were at band camp at the time. It was when I first met him, right before school started, my sophomore year and his freshman year. And he got this button maker, and he took a picture of me and my sister from elementary school yearbook and put it in the button and said, look at Missy and Mandy, look how fat they are, and laughing about it. And so then I chased him around, and then the assistant band director said, give him the button. And then we got the button. And then I put a picture of him in it from elementary school, but he just looked the same actually than as he did then. So I put, like, alien antennas on him, and just made it look silly, and then gave him the button back. So, he was doing the same, but, and then I guess what I did was the same thing too. I mean, it's just people don't think about how it's going to affect somebody, or even if they're doing anything. It's because they're upset with themselves or whatever they're going through. I was upset because I was being told I was fat. So I'm going to give him a button of him looking silly from elementary school, because we're not going to talk about my issues or whatever, as an example. I just really think that those are the kids that really need help, that are bullying, because there's somebody else that's doing something to them, bullying them, I really believe. And that's their way of coping, that I'm not the one that's the victim in this, that I'm a strong person that can, get a hold of somebody else, or they're taking those feelings out on somebody that they don't want to deal with.
Yeah, it seems like they get to a point they feel justified in what they're about to do. Like, this is the right thing to do. I will feel justified. I will feel good if I do this.
Yeah, well, my niece is 14, and she was at lunch, and her supposed best friend was, like, telling her that she had oily hair and that she was nasty, and people around at lunch was laughing about it, and she didn't have oily hair. But for her best friend to do that to her, and to laugh right there in her face and make her cry, and didn't even say she was sorry, I was like, what kind of friend is that? Like, why? Friends are supposed to protect each other and be the person that you enjoy being around, not the person that you're like, when are they going to turn on me? That's sad. I felt so sorry for my niece. And even my son, who's 15, he's in the same grade. When he was in third grade, there were two boys that would give him the hardest time, and they all played football together. And I knew it was because they were jealous of him because he was good at football. And they would always make fun of his hair. He would have like a piece that would always stick up, and he would spend 15 minutes in front of the mirror in the bathroom crying before school at third grade, trying to fix it because he knew what would happen. And it broke my heart because he was worried about fashion and his hair and stuff like that at third grade. He should have been worried about that stuff at that age, but he was worried that they'd say something. And it broke my heart for, that these kids did not care at all. And I know one of them, or actually both of their fathers were in prison, and they had single moms and brothers that probably were trying to parent them, be dad, but then be the older brother that's probably bullying them. So, I know that there's probably, something going on with that. There's a reason. So there's that problem that that's going on.
Yeah. And then another thing too is, what do parents do when they see their child has a problem and they're worried their child is going to do, because our youngest adopted son, he's going to do something.
Yeah.
Not like what we're talking, but I know it. He is going to do something awful.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to prevent it. We've tried to get court ordered counseling because they have kids. That didn't work. They wouldn't do anything.
Yeah. Well, the parent was like, boys will be boys kind of attitude, like those boys, and I'm thinking, what? No, they're torturing my kid. Yeah, they were, this one boy was punching him in the private and kept doing it. And then this was like, finally after that incident, he changed his schedule in school. This was all up into middle school, same kid. And then after they changed his schedule, and then COVID happened, and then he never had a class with him again, and he was fine. He's great now, but that kid's still around. And I went to the elementary school to speak. And those kids were there, and I even remember that kid looking at me and smiling because I purposely looked at him and discussed bullying and like the effects it would have on people. And the kid was looking at me and smiling. It really creeped me out. So, I mean, he has some issues, but
we did foster care. We did therapeutic. We had a lot of problem kids, and then the kids we adopted had major problems, and it can get scary. I mean, we had one girl, I caught her pouring bleach in everybody's milk.
Oh,
and luckily I saw it. We couldn't get any help, any support what about our family safety? So,
yeah.
But I better let you go. We've been on here a long time.
My youngest son, come here. He's huge for a 12-year-old. He's 12. He's like, how tall are you? Like 5'8"? He's like 5'10". He's like
12.
Yeah. He's big. He's a big guy. But he's my youngest. That's Carter.
What kind of Doritos are those? Cool Ranch?
Yeah, Doritos. Yeah. He's the baby that where I had the high blood pressure and the head that was going to explode. So
now I think I know what.
Yeah. No, but he's my calm one. My one that everything went smoothly. Everything isn't so smoothly afterwards. So I'm like, he's a runner. Yeah, he's the one I had to put on a leash. Like to keep up with him.
No, she didn't.
Mom.
She had
no, she didn't.
Like, no,
Yeah.
I know. Well, he was like,
people say,
well, he tried to get away.
CPS, you put your kid on a leash.
Yeah, like it's a monkey leash. It was like a backpack. But he tried to get away from me one day, or he did get away from me. I was trying to put him in the car and take him to daycare and then go to work. And the buses were running, and he got away from me and started running and looking back and laughing. And I'm screaming and saying, please come back. And I couldn't do anything about it. And all I could think of was, he's going to get hit by a bus and he's going to die, and I can't save my child. But then there was a girl standing
there. Smiling. He's proud of himself.
Yeah. And then, but then there was a girl, then she grabbed him and then she saved him. So, I mean, like, there's another thing right there. I mean, there's little angels that have helped me with situations that could have been really bad, that would have, very much frustrated me in the position that I'm in, that I felt like I couldn't protect my child.
I'm just not
okay. Well, I'm going to let you go and enjoy your evening. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for letting me talk to you. You were my counselor
okay.
today. So
Okay. Have
I
you been
enjoyed
on very
talking to
many NDE podcasts?
do what?
Have you been on very many podcasts for
Oh,
near-death
one other
experiences?
one. I was on one other one not too long ago. And I don't usually answer or say anything in those rooms. I really don't. But then for some reason I can't remember what it was said, and I felt compelled to do it. So you're like the second person that asked me. And
Do
then
you know
there's
who it
another
was? I'm
girl-
just curious.
Oh, the man. Shoot. What is his name?
Was it Jeff Mara? Or was
Yes.
it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it was. And the other girl, I think she's from Australia, but we haven't done anything.
Christy Salisbury, maybe?
No,
No?
hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember, but it's on my phone. And
Oh, okay. But you haven't done her yet?
yeah, I wonder if I can look real quick. I'll tell you. Oh yeah,
That's
I'm
okay.
technology impaired. So I didn't
That's okay.
know
I
what
was just
could
wondering if
do.
there's any others out there that.
Let's see.
Okay.
I mean, this is actually talking about near-death experience. That's something that I normally wouldn't talk about because it's such a controversial thing. And plus, also, it's that feeling of like, no one's going to believe me. And, but I know that that's what, what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Or even religious beliefs of like, that didn't happen to you, that kind of stuff, And I, where's it? Let's see. Natalie.
Oh,
And
Natalie. Okay.
I don't know how to say her last name.
Okay. She's a friend of mine.
Oh, okay. Cool. Is she from Australia? Because I think that's what it said.
Yeah, tiny little blonde thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So I responded to her, but she hasn't contacted me back. I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank
But
you.
yeah, thank you. And if you need anything else, let me know.
Okay.
I'll send you that headshot. And then I also have some like pictures, like some stuff from the shooting. If you want me to just kind of send a few of those.
I don't know how to add that stuff. But if you have a website, I can put down the website and they can go to it and look.
It's MissyJenkins.com.
Okay. Good enough.
Yep.
Okay.
And you can share my email too, because I'm still a public speaker. And if anyone, needs someone to come and talk about, any kind of thing, I talk about, more than just school shootings and things like that, but just like, not giving up and that kind of thing, like when you're in a situation. So yeah, if you want to share my email, that's fine too.
Okay. All right. All right. Bye.